Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Heart Chamber. I am your host, Boots Knighton. Today, I interview my fellow heart warrior friend, Rob Thornett. Rob is a former myocardial bridge patient who had unroofing surgery at Stanford in 2018. He is the administrator of the Facebook Myocardial Bridge Support Group, which is how I came to know him. He also wrote the Wikipedia page on myocardial bridges, as well as the FAQ document found on the Facebook site. Rob is an educator and a writer who teaches college and secondary social sciences and environmental science. He has taught in 7 countries and was first diagnosed with the myocardial bridge while teaching in China. In fact, you will be able to find his Chinese medical report at the Heart Chamber Podcast on Instagram. Please join Rob and I for a very insightful conversation. And if you find this episode helpful, I hope you'll go to my website, theheartchamberpodcast.com, and leave a review and even make a donation. Donations help me keep this podcast going. Thanks again for spending your time with me today. Let's dive in. Rob, thanks so much for being with us today. I first became acquainted with Rob through social media when I was embarking on my heart journey. And thankfully, Rob was so generous in guiding me along at the beginning. And I wanted to bring Rob on today as another story, but also to highlight the importance of social media when you're undergoing a really scary health situation. So Rob and I have a lot to talk about today. I want you to start off with where you live now and your heart journey. Just fill us in.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, it's great to meet you for the first time because we did talk so much on Facebook when you were looking for a diagnosis, and you were one of the people
Mhm.
that came on and was asking all kinds of good questions. And so I think your case moved along much faster than a lot of people because you were just kept pressing forward with it. In other words, you could see something was up with what you were being told by your doctors, and you knew it was like not quite right. But you didn't just take that and say, "Okay," and kinda scratch your head for years. You actually went forward and really kept asking me questions, kept asking other people, doctors questions, and it really moved fast. So, I really remember that because not
Mhm.
everybody does that, so it's really cool.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm from Virginia originally, like the DC suburbs, Northern Virginia, and, I won't go into my whole life story, but basically I became a teacher after doing some computer stuff and getting the internet stuff, and long story short, I became an international schools teacher. So I live in Panama for the last 3.5 years, and I've taught a bunch of different countries, about 7 different countries. And I had the issue my whole life. I never knew quite what it was. One of those like so many people on our site, you just had something you knew was off, and you just don't know what it is. And went to probably the emergency room type of clinics about 5 times, in Northern Virginia, multiple times, pointing right to what I know now was the myocardial bridge, like pointing right to it, telling people that I knew, "Oh, there's something going on right here." And you get the eye rolls, and you get the, "Oh, there he goes again." He thinks he has something. Thinks he has a disease. And it's not their fault. They don't know. So, and it makes you worry about yourself. You're thinking, "Am I crazy?" But so many people have had that same story on our site, right? Kind of, "Am I crazy?" Doctors telling you it's anxiety, it's all in your head. That's probably the most common thing that happens on our site is people get told that they have anxiety and it's all in their head. Because it's ironic because there is anxiety, but it's anxiety caused by your heart having its main artery that feeds it squashed every heart. So which tells the brain we're not getting enough oxygen here. So basically, after a lifetime of I've always played sports. I know you're super athletic, right? You ski, you're all over the place
Mhm.
doing stuff. That's
Mhm.
a myth we can debunk right off the bat, which is a common myth that people are told by doctors. "Oh, you couldn't possibly have a myocardial bridge." Because people with myocardial bridges, they can't do anything. They just sit there. They can't do it. It's complete nonsense. Yeah, a professional athlete named Bobby Ryan, who was a professional MLS soccer player, died of a heart attack. Only thing they found, myocardial bridge. World-class cyclist named Mario Cipollini, sprinter, myocardial bridge, had to stop cycling the last couple of years, had some kind of surgery. So you get the picture, but I played, varsity baseball in high school. I played tons of basketball, played football when I was a kid, played like just all kinds of stuff. I still lift weights. I was working out even with the myocardial bridge when I was in my 40s. So it actually, a lot of people, it makes you feel better when you exercise because your whole body gets involved in circulation instead of just the heart. So makes a lot of people feel better. And I always give the same example, but we had a guy on our site who was a competitive cyclist. He was doing like long distance cycling races. And he said, I'd bicycled like 35 miles, something like that, around the shoreline. Came back and felt great. Came back, sat down to write some emails, and then I passed out. Just like writing some emails. And that's a lot
Mhm.
of people's experience. They exercise. I don't know if you had the same thing where you exercise and like next couple 3, 4, 5 hours, you just feel like garbage. I don't know if you have that feeling
Oh,
at all.
yeah.
I don't know. It
Mhm.
just you have that down. It's just really bad. I don't know. We never quite pinpointed why that was. It's still an open mystery, but I think a lot of people have that kind of post exercise funk or whatever. But I had that for years. So no one could figure out what it was. And so long story short, I was teaching in China. This would be 2017. No, I'm sorry, 20 beginning of 2018. And I came back from a break in the Western China up in the mountains, a high altitude city called Kunming. I was up there. And the altitude was killing me, because you're not getting enough oxygen to your heart. I had no idea why. I was like, what's wrong with me? And I saw people from other countries coming and visiting, rugby teams coming in. They had like running around and all of a sudden I could barely walk down the street 10 blocks to get from my hotel to this restaurant I would eat at. And I was like, there is something wrong here. So after long story short, I came back to a regular altitude city called Shenzhen in China, which is across from Hong Kong, where I taught. And the day I came back, the night, I had some kind of episode. I don't know what it was, but maybe a piece of plaque broke off, like, as they say, right before the myocardial bridge and got stuck somewhere. I don't know, but it was definitely one of those like big time like alert episodes. And I was just lying
Mhm.
there in a hotel, in the dark. I was like, oh gosh, this is bad. Next morning, I didn't know what to do. I felt groggy and out of it. Called long distance, called my brother. I hadn't talked to him in years, so a couple of years now. And I said, I had something wrong with my heart last night. I don't know what it was. He started screaming, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. I was like, okay, I know. He's like, go to the doctor. I was like, okay. So first I was going to go across to Hong Kong, which is more modern, et cetera. Then they told me, okay, that's going to take forever. Just go near in Shenzhen, which is a pretty modern city. So I went to the emergency room. I'll cut through it. Basically, I went to the emergency room multiple times at multiple hospitals. One told me I had gallstones or I might have gallstones. Then they checked for gallstones, no gallstones. Then I went to another emergency room on the other side of the city. It told me, the guy gave me he listened to me, like, listen to the patient. He went, listen to me for like 10 minutes. He's like, I think you need to get better sleep. He gave me this
Oh
15-minute spiel
gosh.
about why I needed better sleep. So I'm like, oh my God. I said, look, I don't have gallstones. I sleep fine. It's not the problem. I need a heart test. I need a CT scan. Can you do it? And I'm like, well, I don't think you have a problem. I'm like, can I pay cash? So I paid like, I think $600. I forget what it was, $700 cash. Went out to a suburban hospital, got the test out there. Took me about a week to get scheduled. I'm just doing this alone too. So, and went out there, did the CT, something else too. I think a brain CT or something. I don't know what, but the chest CT, long story short, revealed that, well, first of all, it came spitting out of almost like a vending machine. It was like a piece of film, you know, like a giant
Gosh.
piece of film with all these little frames on it. And you normally see that on your CD, but my CD didn't work. And so I was like, it was all in Chinese. So I'm like, oh God. So the film, you put your number into the machine and it spits out the film. So I get this big piece of film. I'm like, what am I looking at? And then there's a piece of paper that comes with it all in Chinese. So I went up to the nurse's station. I said, look, I'm leaving, but like, I don't even know what this says. And he says, it's some kid who's like 22 years old, a nurse, whatever. He just looks at it. He's like, no, it's okay. It's okay. And I was like, well, what, yeah. So I look at the bottom and there's a little note at the bottom, like something colon something in Chinese. And I'm like, well, it looks like a note, like something beyond something, like, what does that say? So he's like, I don't know. Can you translate it? He's like, okay. So he translates it in Bing Translate because Google's blocked in China. So Bing Translate. It says myocardial bridge, left anterior descending artery, mid LAD, mid left anterior descending artery. I'm like, what is that? He's like, well, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's no big deal. And so I was standing in front of this kid, just like, okay, they found something. It gave me some excitement that somebody found something. You know that feeling, right? When you get
Mhm.
that first
Oh,
something, so
yes.
somebody yeah, somebody finally found something, right? 45, years doing this.
Validation.
Some kind of validate exactly. Some kind of validation that
Mhm.
like, no, it's not just you. It's not the eye rolls and everything. And so I binged it. I searched it right there in front of the guy, myocardial bridge. And I found this, I said, normally benign, but can cause this, and this. I'm like, oh, that's it. And I said, it's not okay. To this guy. And I
Mhm.
walked out, right? So I felt like I had some possible, like you're a ship and you've been lost for like forever and you finally found some, you know what I mean? Like you see a glimmer, like a dove, whatever, flying overhead, going somewhere, some island somewhere. You have a clue that there might be something. But I think so many people have the same type of story, but just in a different, another weird way. Like everyone was diagnosed, it seems like in some odd way, it's never the right
Mhm.
way. Once in a while, they do it like the normal way, or it's usually like some strange way. So my strange way was that. And then, so I walk out to this is this giant communist hospital, massive platform in front of marble, with these huge steps. No one's there. It's like 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. And I'm standing there with this guy with shorts and a piece of film in his hand on this gargantuan, looks like a museum front or something, looking out, and there's no one there. And I'm like, just this guy staying there, this American guys, broken Chinese, like, what do I do? And so it's always remember that, just that feeling of staying there, like, I'm just like out here alone, but I got this one little tiny piece. I got this one piece of knowledge I didn't have before. And you know what I mean? At least I got that.
Right.
So I went
Well,
back
and
to the
if I
hospital.
could
Yeah.
interrupt you, I'm
Yeah, go ahead.
just
Yeah, yeah.
still stuck on the fact that you're looking at this report in Chinese and
Yeah.
you were able to glimmer from it that there was something noted there. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just still there because
Yeah.
you could have just walked away and not ever had that translated for you.
I think about that a lot, yeah. And I think that's what happens when you go 45 years and you're tired of it. You're gonna ask that one last question. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
You're gonna go that one extra step. I think that's part of it,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. It
um
was very I just think about the awareness that that took. And
mm,
then for you to press this young man to, "No, please translate this for me." And he
yeah,
was ready
yeah,
just to, like, see you on your way, and you're like, "No, no, no. No, no."
yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's like PhD level advocating for yourself. But anyway, continue.
Well, just to make a connection on that to other people's
Mhm.
cases, probably your case too, that, that's in China. That's a kid in China doing that, telling me something that was not quite right. Okay, he can be forgiven, right? He's a nurse in China, whatever. Not because it's
Right.
China, but because there's some smart people there. And by the way, let me just say, nobody found it in the United States. It took some radiology. I was thinking I should fly back there and I should find this guy in the back and ask who was on duty that day. Well, who's the radiologist that put that on there? Because he could have saved my life. And find that guy and give him like a new electric car or something. I don't know if they make electric cars. That's it.
Okay.
But anyway, I don't
Wow.
know what, but like he deserves a medal. So it's not just like China has a lot of smart people. Don't get me wrong. It's not the China problem. What I was going to say was that, okay, that's that situation. But from the site, right? We have people on our site at major hospitals. I won't name any, but who had the diagnosis on their report. And then it took 3, 4, 5 years for somebody to actually tell them. The doctor saw it right there, didn't even bother to say it to the patient. That's a bigger problem, than this some kid who's 22. You know what I mean? That a doctor who should know better and just, anybody keeping up with the medical literature ought to know that I mean, it's long been it was 50 years ago they knew myocardial bridges were a problem when they were doing surgery. So
And
anyway,
that's why
but
it's so important to read the doctor's notes and to read the reports yourself. I mean, you have to, get a quick education on how to read medical lingo, but
yeah,
you can look up terms. And I mean, that's what I had to
absolutely.
do at the start. I had to teach myself. And luckily, my undergraduate degree is in biology. So I have education around how to read reports and a broad vocabulary, but I still had to look up a lot of the terms. I mean, you have to go to school in order to read your own reports, but it's worth it.
Right. That's right. And that's kinda where I was. I wa at the beginning stage. I was at the
Mhm.
lost trying to figure it out stage. So, like, a lot now it's different. This is, like, over 4 years later, but that's where I was, and it wasn't that long ago. So, I totally remember that. And so how did I get from basically, I went back to this hotel, was binging like crazy. I was like, okay, myocardial bridge. Who can solve this problem? Who's that? What do you do with this? And I found some guy in Pittsburgh. I mean, Philadelphia. Some guy does robotic surgery. He mentioned he did something. Turned out it was a bust because he just did a bypass. It's just not the right surgery. It's a secondary surgery, but not a primary. But Stanford's name came up. Stanford, Stanford, Stanford. So I was like, oh, okay. Stanford has all these magazine stories about it. It's like, oh, okay. Stanford actually might know something about this. And so I Googled Stanford, the people that I could talk to at Stanford. So I found the surgeon, Dr. Jack Boyd, who ended up being the guy that did my surgery. And I emailed him. I said, I see you have some papers. Help me. Like, what can I do? How do I do this? Luckily, he got back to me within like a day or two. And he forwarded me to Dr. Schnittger, Dr. S. I know you talked to right at Stanford yourself, who was
Mhm.
the team leader there. She's kind of the administrative leader of the myocardial. First of all, they have a team. Nobody's got a team. Like now there's a couple other teams, but they're just following Stanford's team. Stanford was the first one
Mhm.
to have a team. And it's a really good team. They have like top-notch surgeon, top-notch cath person, top-notch radiologists. All these people are top-notch. So Dr. Snicker says, okay, you can either DHL me that piece of film, which is going to take maybe a couple of weeks. I don't know, it's from China. It's going to cost you $100, whatever. Or you could take pictures of it with your phone and send it to me. I said, you sure that's going to work? It's like, yeah, you can just take pictures. All right. Because this is old school, so this is like they probably learned on the film back in the day. So I put it up against the hotel window. So you can imagine me, I'm in the hotel, like with the windows coming in, skyscrapers all around. I'm about the 25th floor. And through the film, you can see the next skyscraper over. I'm taking pictures on my phone of the different. I have no idea what I'm even looking at. I'm just like taking pictures. And I send her all the pictures. Next day, she says, her and Donna, the nurse, she says, you should come. You should come in. We see the bridge. It's definitely there. You should come in. And when Stanford tells you should come in, it means they see something. Then I can be like, yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
kind of, sort of.
They don't
They
mess
see something,
around.
right? They don't mess around. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, good. That was speaking of affirmation and validation, that was like mega. That was like, just getting the piece of information in Chinese, but then actually having Stanford tell you that that's real was like
Mhm.
huge. And by the way, a side note, like looking at it, I spent the next, I don't know, 6 months staring at that film, not having any idea what I was even looking at. And now I can look at it and I could teach a 3-year-old how to find the myocardial bridge, but I literally spent like, is that it? Is it this piece? Is it what? I wonder if it's that.
You taught
And I
me.
literally was going on. Yeah, later. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So make a long story short, I went home. I flew back to the United States. I couldn't stay in China anymore. So I had to get the surgery. And it took me about a month to get up insurance. I had to get my insurance going. It cost $700 a month in Massachusetts, out of pocket, just like a private plan, Blue Cross Blue Shield, PPO. And then I had to pay the deductible on top of that, another 7,000. So 700 a month plus 7,000, which to a lot of people was a lot of money, but it paid for a heart operation that cost, I don't know, 150, 200,000, something like that. And I never
Mhm.
received even a bill after the operation. Never even received a bill. It was all just paid for. So,
Yeah,
it is what it is.
right.
And by the way, if anybody is stuck out there and can't get surgery or too expensive or whatever it is, you have options. I live in Panama. There's a guy in Panama who says he'll do it right here. He's did a heart transplant. You have to. Unroofing surgery is usually not that difficult. Didn't your surgeon say it was a piece of cake? I think the one
Oh,
you went
yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but also mine was it was easy, but it wasn't because I had multiple
Mm,
bridges on multiple arteries.
mm, mm.
So, he said, yeah, that it was standard and fine, but for me personally in my heart, it was a lot of cutting.
Yeah. You had how many bridges do you have? Like 5 or something like that, right?
3.
The
I had
O
3.
3? It's like the
Mhm.
ones we don't usually hear about, like OM and there's other
Yeah,
ones, right?
OM1 and
What
OM2, the obtuse marginal branches, and then obviously the
Yeah,
LAD.
yeah. Yeah, those other 2 don't come up very often, but they do, like, the other ones do come up, like the RCA, OM, and they
Mhm.
do cause symptoms. It's
Yeah.
just because it hasn't been studied
Yeah,
much
and my
doesn't mean it
surgeon
doesn't
said,
happen. Yeah.
my OMs were my obtuse marginals were bridged enough that they were probably causing problems, but it was more the LAD than
Yeah.
anything because mine went down to the ventricle.
Oh, wow. So you so
Mhm.
yours was one of the well, I was about to caveat that when we say it's usually a pretty simple surgery, I was gonna say, unless it's super deep, and in yours case, it
Mhm.
was, right? But he still
Yeah,
said it was a piece of
yeah.
cake, didn't he, I think, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
but I think he's just
Yeah.
a ninja at what he does.
Yeah, right. Well, okay. He just kinda like the Willie Mays of, he just, like, makes everything looks easy, right? Like Willie
Yeah,
Mays.
yeah,
Um,
it's mind-blowing.
yeah, it's really I mean, and yeah, it's some of these guys, what they do is incredible, like Dr. Boyd at Stanford, and then the guy at Chicago, and the
Mhm,
guy that you had. Those 2 of those they've had people whose LADs have gone through the heart muscle into the chamber where the blood hangs out, and then they just make a hole to get it out, and then they just patch the hole up during the surgery. They put a hole in your heart, then patch it up to
mhm.
get the artery out. I don't even know how they do that, but it's incredible, yeah. So, yeah, no, I just, was basically went into a holding pattern for, living with relatives for, like, the next geez, it was, like, from about the end of April to I had surgery right before Christmas, and
That's a
I
long
was
time
just
to be in a holding pattern.
it was a weird holding pattern. Yeah, exactly, because first I got Stanford, told me go out there, and then I was like, "Maybe I should just go out there, just go." But I was like, "Well, I heard about this robotic assisted surgery, which is like it's the surgeon doing it, but it's a robot that does the actual work, and the robot can get so fine, like finer than even a human hand can get, and a human eye too, because they magnify it. I really wanted to get that, and honestly, if I could do it again, I would have done that, not because there's anything wrong, but just because that's to me, why go through a much worse recovery when you don't have to, when we have technology. Yeah.
Mhm,
The reason I
right.
didn't was because I couldn't find anybody to do it. So I spent the next May, June, July, like the next 7 months, I guess. I taught in the fall at 2 very, very bad schools, unfortunately. Very rough schools, last minute jobs, and it was brutal going to work, feeling like I could barely stand up. And
Yeah, describe
what
what your
happened
symptoms
was
were by now,
yeah,
because, like, you had that one bad incident in China that got you
yeah.
into the hospital, but, like, were you
Mhm.
deteriorating over the next many weeks? Because that's what happened to
It was a
me.
yeah, I think what happens is I don't know exactly, but something slips in there, a plaque moves this way, then people just get worse. Yeah, I mean, for me, what that meant was even when I was still in China waiting to come home, like that month I was getting my flight and everything, like, it was basically me getting up in the morning, feeling tired from the moment I woke up, like, just totally and just like, "Okay, I'm just gonna trudge to the mall, and I'm gonna sit in Starbucks all day long." And that's what I was doing. I was trudging to the mall, sitting in a Starbucks for like 12 hours a day, and then getting up, eating
That's
some
not a
sushi, and
quality
come
of
back to
life.
start just well, because I wanted to be in an air conditioned place where I could breathe because the air is denser when it's air conditioned, and they have good air
Mhm,
conditioning at Starbucks. It's just tropical city. And because,
mm,
I wanna sit down in a comfortable chair because 'cause I'm gonna be there for 12 hours.
right.
So it was like, I'm not I was just like, that's where I was. And again, I was like, same as you, I was very athletic and everything. Yeah, so it was and it stayed like that the whole rest of the year. Even when I was living in Massachusetts waiting for surgery, relatives lived in Salem, the witch trial city. I was up there and I basically get up in the morning and trudge to a coffee shop, try to change them up each day and just sit there all day in the air conditioning. That was it. That was my life.
Mm,
Writing stuff, thinking about stuff, just waiting to get started. And then going to teach, which sucked, honestly.
mhm.
Up in front of kids who weren't the best behavior kids, trudging from the parking lot to school, having difficulty just walking, and then pretending like everything's cool in front of 30 people, all day long. So, yeah, so I mean, I'm not alone. Other people have to do similar things, very difficult stuff. So basically, I did that, and just to have a job and stay afloat and pay for the insurance and all that. And so my plan was to try to get the robotic surgery. And so I found one guy in Philadelphia and one guy in New York City. I made 3 trips. I'll try to cut it to I made 3 trips to New York City. I drove from Boston to New York City 3 times, only to get the worst cath that's ever been delivered, by some guy who it looked like, compared to Stanford's cath, which is like multimedia digital output with compression and
Mhm.
DFFR, they did none of that. It looked like the old Atari Pong or something, like the old, video games where there's just like one thing going back and
Now you're dating
just like a
yourself.
little
Yeah.
green yeah, I'm 49, so it's like but, it was just silly. I was like, "Really? I drove for this, and this is what you" and then the surgeon afterwards said, "You don't have a Rob, like, you don't have a myocardial infarction, okay? Like, you have maybe an arm problem. You should really see a kinesthesiologist, a sports doctor, because you mentioned some shoulder pain, basic physical therapy."
An
It
arm
was
problem.
yeah, and that was after I said, "Stanford already diagnosed it." He's like, "No, Stanford Schmanford, they don't know anything because a lot of doctors, their egos are so big, right? not all, but that they just have this kind of thing where if any other hospital said this, they say, and they just, they just do their thing. So he blew it off and I got nowhere. And which didn't help my case with my family either. You know what I mean? Because there's, still because they don't know. How do they know what maybe I'm still making it up. And then I went to the Philadelphia guy. 3 trips, 3 trips there, two maybe. This was interesting. So I saw the gatekeeper cardiologist to get to the robotic surgeon. My goal is to try to get robotic surgery. And I found these guys on the Da Vinci machine site. It's the machine they use for robotic called the Da Vinci. You can find a directory of surgeons there. And said Philadelphia because nobody in Boston showed up. So on that list. So I went to this guy, I won't name his name, but he was a top US News and World Report top doctor. And so was the other guy in New York too. And I went there and I told him the same thing. I think I'm already diagnosed with the myocardial bridge. It's on the scan. I'm holding it in my hand. Here it is. But I didn't know how to point to it. And he looks at it and he says, Rob, I'll be honest with you. I don't know how to read these for myocardial bridges. So, but I don't think that's your problem. And let me talk to the radiologist. Talks to the radiologist. Didn't even bring my scan with him. So he's just talking to them about the abstract. And long story short, comes back and gives me a call in the afternoon. He's like, "It's not your problem. Thanks for driving down, but I don't think you have a myocardial bridge. You should probably go see a sports therapist. Work on your rotator cuff or something." So again, just a complete bust. So I never got to see that surgeon at all on that trip. To cut that story, basically 3 months later, I finally pestered them enough where the surgeon, he's a famous surgeon actually, he's done over 1,000 robotic surgeries, finally agreed to talk to me. And and I drove back down there and I talked through traffic and everything at night. And I finally talked to this guy at a 6 o'clock appointment. Master surgeon, he's got videos of himself online. And he was just perplexed and baffled by the whole thing. And he said of stretches, and he comes back after looking at my videos. He's like, Robert, 99% of surgeons wouldn't touch this. And I'm looking back, I'm like, are you kidding me? They've been doing this surgery for 50 years. And so here's this guy who's this master surgeon. So I was just like, oh, okay, I give up with this guy. So he just wouldn't do it. You can't change their mind. If they're not going to do it, they're not going to do it. So I gave up and I went to Stanford.
How much longer did you wait to go to Stanford?
I was actually I actually had to go to Stanford 4 times because the timing was so bad with scheduling there. People kept being on vacation over the summer and everything. So I was already 2 visits into Stanford when that guy finally agreed to talk to me, the Philadelphia guy. I'd already been to Stanford twice, I think, before that. So it was just a little bit more like I had each test in a separate, like I had one time I just consulted, one time I had CT and stress echo, one time I had cath, and then finally I had surgery. So finally had the surgery in December, 3 days before Christmas. And there's another really good dude named Paul Giordano on our site, who's also from Virginia and also had the surgery, like, I think a day or 2 after I did. And that's yet another myth that we can bust, which is that young people can't possibly have symptoms from myocardial bridges because Paul was 20, I think 21, or he was just graduating from college about that time. And this is pretty wild because Paul's story is wild. Paul self-diagnosed. He figured this out by himself. And he's a physical therapist, I think. He's he's a very in shape guy. And so maybe he's very in tune with his body and research and all that. But he was able to self-diagnose and he got on our site and was asking questions. And by that time, we knew a little bit more. So yeah, he was self-diagnosed, which is amazing that he did that at that age. So he had surgery at Stanford too. I think some of his relatives lived out in California. So he could stay with them. But so I had the surgery, yeah, and 3 or 4 people, we all had surgery in the same week, I think, or before Christmas. Did like 40 of them or something. It was crazy because everyone wanted to get the end of the year deductible. They wanted to get the surgery before the deductible restarted for the new year. So after the surgery, there was a lot of pain. You probably had the same thing, post-op pain, right? Your chest has to heal. Did you have the sternotomy or the thoracotomy? I can't remember.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. They went this way or they went sideways?
Yeah, no, they went up and down.
Sternotomy? Okay, yeah, I had the thoracotomy where you go through the ribs, and
Okay.
that people ask that a lot, like, which is better? And I don't know which is better, but, like, the selling point for the sideways through the ribs was that it's a smaller incision, which it is. I think it's, like, maybe 4 inches roughly depending on the person, whereas a sternotomy is, like, a much longer incision. But there is a downside, which is notable, which is that, the sternotomy, at least they're not cutting through muscle. It's more just through your bone, right? They go right through your sternum and kind of separate that. Whereas the thoracotomy, they don't go through bone, but they go through your pectoral muscle, like a big chicken breast, So it's like, so that
Mhm.
hurts, like it still hurts a little teeny bit. Not, I wouldn't say it hurts, but it's tender, whatever you want to call it. So that's something to be
Oh,
aware of,
interesting.
So,
This many years later, it
yeah,
still
it's
is
not
tender
like
for you.
still tender for sure. Yeah. That's incision in the whole area
Okay.
there. Yeah. It took a while to be able to lift weights and do stuff with that muscle. It took a while.
Mhm.
So that's like one more reason why, like, if you ask me, people come on the site all the time and they say, like, what's the best way to get surgery? I tell them, look, this is, and people don't always listen to me, but I say I would do robotic surgery,
Mhm.
not because of this person or that person or this or that, just because why go through all that suffering, all that pain? That's what it's made for. It's made to reduce the recovery time. I think people say a matter of weeks versus like over a year, of really healing.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's kinda how I had the surgery, and after the surgery, I came back to Massachusetts. I had fluid in my lungs. A lot of people get that. I had a bit of fluid. It was causing me problems. Some other people have like a liter of fluid in their lungs, and that comes from the lung being deflated during surgery. They put like some kind of tranquilizer to get it out of the way, and it deflates, and
Mhm.
then somehow moisture condenses on that when it's deflated. So it's a common thing. And so they stick a little needle in your back and then suck the fluid out at the local hospital. I did that in Massachusetts. So
Were you awake for
it
that
was
procedure?
I was awake and it was weird. Yeah, yeah, it was weird.
That sounds
And
like a great time.
yeah, it wasn't a party. And you should have seen the guy who did it too. He looked like he was about to, just like hanging out at a pool club or something, like drinking a beer, just like walking around like it's no big deal. Making jokes with people. And I'm like, and he sticks a needle right through my back. I was like, okay, you can do that too. All right. And then
Oh
like
my
5 minutes
gosh.
afterwards, like 5 minutes afterwards, I was like, oh, I got through it. And then I had what's called a vagal reaction. Your vagus nerve goes nuts and your blood pressure drops to like 30 something. And I was like, oh my
Mhm.
God. I had no idea what was going on. So that lasted about 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, no, so I get out of there. But a lot of people have that fluid in the lungs post-op. And that's another big point I wanted to, make sure we mentioned is that if people always ask, well, how long should I stay after surgery around the hospital? Like a day, a week, and
Mhm.
Stanford told me, like 10 days, be cleared to go. First, it can be expensive, Stanford's an expensive area, but if you can, I think it's good to stay for a couple weeks, like 14 days, because that way, if any complications like that come up, they can just go right back to the people who did it and they're going to understand instead of having to explain it all to some random guy, that the local hospital or
Mhm.
something like that. How long did you stay after operation?
Well, so I had mine, 5 hours down the road from where I live. I'm in, the
Mm,
Tetons on the border of
mm,
Wyoming and Idaho. And I went down to just south of Salt Lake City at Intermountain Medical. And I think I was only in the hospital for 4 nights post open heart, and then they sent me on my merry way. But, I just really bounced back. I mean, I had, major vomiting afterwards because I had a major, major, major allergic reaction to the anesthesia. But then that subsided within 24 hours, and they ended up releasing me early because I was doing so well. But,
mm,
it was no problem for my husband to drive me right back down if I ran into any issues, which I did not.
mm. So how far was that from your house? The place you actually
5
had the
hours.
surgery? Okay.
Yeah,
So
5
so you were there in
hours.
the hospital and then you just went home, like straight back to your house? Or you hang out in
Mhm.
a hotel
Yep.
in the area? Okay.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. They just said, "Nope, you could go on back home." And, I was really thankful I was able to do that because, I had gone out to Stanford for all the testing, and then they canceled my surgery due to COVID. And that was
Oh,
so
wow.
deflating, and
I
I was
forgot about that.
so symptomatic. What's that?
Oh, wow. I remember that. Yeah, but I remember you being
Yeah.
symptomatic. I forgot about the COVID part. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, so I then
Yeah.
had been doing unroofing surgeries all fall, and then
Right.
they cancel I was, like, the start of where they put it all on hold again, but, I was gonna have to wait to do the dobutamine testing, which you have to do for myocardial bridging. I was
Yeah.
gonna have to wait. The next time they had an opening was in April, and I was like, "I'm not gonna live that long." And it
Right.
it was really, like, I could tell I was out of time.
Mm. Wow. Wow. That's wild. It got that bad that
Yeah.
quick. Like, it just dropped off a
Oh,
cliff
yeah.
like
I
that.
I went
Yeah.
from like, elite athlete to not being able to wash my own dishes in my kitchen within a matter of days. And the
Wow.
way I understand it is, when, like, you've got a garden hose and you just let,
Yeah.
you let the water flow through,
Mhm.
But if you run over the garden hose enough with your car or bend it enough to stop the flow of water, that garden hose loses its pliability. And
Yep.
then the water doesn't pass through the way it used to.
Yeah.
And so I view my arteries as, they were all little garden hoses passing
Mhm.
blood through to the heart. And finally on, a one mountain bike ride, I looked back down and I could see I was getting more and more symptomatic, but I had been getting over a traumatic brain injury and I kept blaming that. But I
Mm.
think it was really the myocardial bridging because I was having more and more breathlessness. But it was
Yeah.
the one day that I had a heart attack while mountain biking. And that's when the arteries gave out and they never really quite recover. And then within a matter of a couple of months, it was like very little water was getting through those garden hoses.
Damn.
And so it
You
took
you actually had a
unroofing
heart
them
attack
for them. Mhm.
you actually had a
Yeah.
heart attack while mountain biking?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And how
And I survived and I finished the mountain bike ride
that's the important thing, right?
because I'd already gotten to the top and I was going to finish my ride. And I wasn't
Who
believing because why would a 42-year-old woman who's in the best shape of her life have a heart attack?
Right.
And
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But I was with my husband, and both of us we're both like first responders, and
Yeah.
we
Oh, wow.
totally ignored all the signs because like there's no way. We totally
Yeah.
talked ourselves
That
out of it.
that's another you just brought up a whole bunch of points there, like, one being that, that's a funny thing too, like, if you have other things going on with your health, then it makes it more like, we see this all the time in the site, right? People go, "Well, I got this and this. I don't know if it's actually the myocardial bridge that's causing the symptoms because I also have this other thing over here or this or this."
Mhm.
And a lot of times, yeah, it's you do have that and that, but it's this. It's also this too, and also doctors don't always connect the dots, they'll say, you have a myocardial bridge. And you also have these vasospasms. I don't know where they're coming from. It's
Okay.
like they're bridge. They're
Yeah.
caused by the bridge,
The
dude,
bridge, silly.
Yeah, like, where do you think they're
Mhm.
coming from? Yeah, because like you said, it's a garden hose, and then, like, you squash it every heartbeat for your whole life, and then
Mhm.
the endothelium, the lining of it, basically doesn't respond. It's supposed to just open when there's nitric oxide pass it's supposed to create nitric oxide and then expand when that's secreted, but it just stops doing that, so it just like a flat tire, it just keeps collapsing, and then your blood circulation gets cut off to your own heart, so, yeah.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
didn't
I
I
couldn't
forgot
cook.
yeah,
I couldn't
yeah,
stand to shower. It was exhausting just to put clothes on. I too was a teacher at the time, and after the 3 weeks of school, once school started again, I
mhm,
was so exhausted walking from the silly parking lot to my building. And then I remember the very last day that I worked at the school,
mm,
I walked in and two of my coworkers looked at me and I was like, "I cannot do this anymore." And they're like, "You look like you're about to die." Like I was white, I couldn't breathe, my chest was killing me, and by then I had already been in contact with Schnicker and she was working to get me in. I was just waiting for the phone call from them to schedule me. But
mm,
I went to the administration and I said, I can't do this anymore. I have to resign. So I had to quit my
wow.
job. And then I just sat and
What
waited
was
for surgery like you.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much, just in a holding pattern, like, just
Mhm.
surgery, surgery, surgery every night, like, okay, countdown and surgery. Yeah, it's unbelievable, and I didn't realize that, though. I didn't realize you had a heart attack mountain biking and that you were teaching also, and then you had to resign. Believe me, I get that, and yeah, that's the other thing too, like you just said, it's the little things, right? It's not you could probably do some exercise, but then all of a sudden you just walk from here to here, and it's like, somehow that's really exhausting, just the small stuff. I don't
Yeah.
know
And
why that
don't
is,
ask
but
me to
yeah.
carry anything in the process.
Mhm.
I mean, and when we did
Totally.
go to California, my husband was like wheeling me through the airport in a wheelchair. I mean, it was just like the thought of getting from
Mm,
one concourse to the next. And then
mm,
for them to cancel the surgery and I had to fly back home after the heart cath, I
yeah.
found hell. I
I
found hell.
mm, it sucks. I mean, yeah. I don't know. I haven't had a heart attack so that's brutal. Yeah. Wow. And then
Mhm.
but I remember when Stanford shut down this it just went cold turkey during COVID for a while there. They just weren't doing surgeries for
Yeah.
like 6 months or something, right? Yeah.
Let's see, so then canceled me mid-December, and then
Mhm.
I didn't tell them that I found a different surgeon and had surgeries, and
Mhm.
so they called me in March telling me they would schedule me for April, And I was so relieved that I didn't wait because I don't think I know I wouldn't have survived. And I just thought to myself, there was no way I could, I would have either died from, my heart fully giving out from lack of oxygen, or I would have just gone crazy and died from being crazy. Like,
Mm.
it's something else to have to sit there and wait for what is considered an elective surgery, but it certainly
Mm.
does not feel elective. Like, I think of
No.
elective surgery as like a nose job, like, plastic surgery or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
Totally.
was not elective in my point of view.
No, and given the fact that there's people having heart attacks and dying from this, we've seen in the news,
Mhm.
it's just for anybody who's not familiar, we have a Facebook myocardial bridge support group site. It's got a document that's 50 pages long. It's a frequently asked questions document, and at the end of that, I put like 50 studies in there, and there's an entire page or more worth of reports of people who seem to have died from nothing else was found except the myocardial bridge. Yeah, that's not an elective surgery if you're trying to not have that happen, it's like it's like that's a
Right.
serious surgery, yeah. And that's the thing
Well, my
that's
poor
yeah.
husband sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, doc, we just have to keep spreading it. I think we've done a lot to spread awareness about it, really, in the last 4 years, but still, there's a lot of static. They have to, like a lot of, doctors just never really learned about the correct information in medical school, and so
Mhm.
you have to kind of like it's always a friction when the patient knows more than the doctor about a topic. You're a teacher too, right? So like I'm a teacher, you're a teacher. If you're a teacher, you have the experience of getting your butt handed to you every once in a while, right? You come in, you think you know something, and then it turns out on that
Mhm.
particular point, actually the student knows something on that particular point that you didn't know. But it humbles you and you say, okay, now I know something I didn't know before. That's cool. I'm not, no big deal. But I don't think doctors get that the sort of grounding very often, and so they're maybe a little more sensitive to it or something like that. So it's real hard for a patient to go in and have a doctor be wrong. And then the patient kind of knows they're right because they've done the research. It's all out there. I mean, we have the Wikipedia page, the Facebook site, everything. And the doctor just won't budge. Like we have many cases, you've probably seen them, right? Where they said, I gave the doctor
Where
the video, the site, the myths, the this, and the doctor just literally refused to read anything. It gave him studies, gave him papers, wouldn't read it. So it's like, yeah, it's like if they're not going to listen, you can't convince someone. So, but
no. And yeah,
yeah,
that's the ego does not serve the patient one bit.
mm,
It just doesn't.
doesn't.
Yeah, and, my husband, he still talks about how from that mountain bike ride until maybe about a month and a half after my open heart surgery,
Mm,
he would wake up every night and make sure I was still breathing. Like, that was our reality.
mm,
And there was many nights where I would I would go to bed and think to myself, because I didn't want to alarm him, but I was feeling so bad. My heart was
mm,
hurting so much. And I was just I had all the symptoms. And I would think to myself, I hope I get to wake up tomorrow.
wow.
And that just has, I don't go to bed thinking about that every night still, but I would say at least once a week, I wake up and I'm like, cool, I got up today. I'm awake. Like, I am going to get up and do this thing called life. I get to get out of bed
Mm,
and I get to pay bills and wash dishes and clean the toilet or go skiing, whatever it is that I do with my days. But people's complaints now, I think to myself, I'd give I'm so thankful that I can have a complaint. I'm thankful that I can participate
yeah,
in life because it just felt like I was so on the cusp every day of losing my life. And I don't know if you
yeah.
felt that way.
I have, and I like if I feel tired, I'm like, I don't know, should I go for a jog or not? I'm like, okay, there was time not that long ago when I was sitting in Starbucks for 15 hours a day, just sitting there
Uh-huh.
because I couldn't do anything. I was just like, so like maybe I should go for that jog, like just be glad you can go for a jog. So and just to be clear, I exercise a lot. I go to the gym and run and stuff. There's still some issues,
Yeah, so
and that
tell us
goes.
about your recovery. So you've had your surgery and
Mhm.
hung around Stanford, recovered, but then you had to
Yeah,
have the fluid taken out of your lungs in
yeah,
Massachusetts, and then
and that
what?
was pretty soon afterwards. Yeah, so basically, and the funny thing is, before that school year started, I was talking to my relatives like, "Well, maybe you shouldn't work this year." And so it was maybe like I wouldn't work at all. And I was like, "Well, that gonna be sitting around doing nothing all day. That's not gonna be good either." So after the operation, I picked up a part-time job teaching IB geography at the International School of Boston. got real lucky. Somebody quit. And luckily it was part-time. It was exactly what I needed, just part-time. It's just something I knew in my wheelhouse. I taught geography for a long time. And so 17 days after surgery, I went back into the classroom and I didn't feel like going back into the class. It was, and
I'm
it was
thinking, wow,
January, you
you
know? So,
are better than me. I was
no,
not ready
well,
17 days later.
I don't wanna in any way make it sound like this was a piece of cake or something like that. It was literally like sleep all day, like just sleep like a hibernating bear all day long because it's freezing in Boston also. And I was my body your body gets like so your body's just exhausted after surgery. Somebody just sliced you open, basically. So I'm just like sleeping all day, eating, and then, I think I got back in the car like 10 days after surgery. I probably shouldn't have, but I just drove a little bit. And so I'm commuting in and out of Boston like an hour each way to do these classes. And I would go up like I was exhausted. I would go up the first month or so, I would go up one flight of stairs, and my heart rate went through the roof. Like I would go up like 10 actual stairs and then I would stop and be like, Jesus Christ. And just like wait for it to come back down again. That went on for like the first month or so. And I remember thinking like, is this going to stop at some point? Like this whole thing with the heart. And eventually it
Mhm.
sort of petered out like in the second month. So that was a wacky, it was a wacky, but there was a nice kids. And so it was an easier thing to do. And then by the end of the semester, I was started to sort of ish, normally kind of ish. But people ask, like, how long does it take to recover from I mean, really, like, at least a year, to really feel half decent, after somebody cuts you open like that, or
Mhm.
longer. So but, yeah, so and then, then I got the job in Panama over the summer off of LinkedIn, and then I came down here, 8 months after surgery, yeah, I still couldn't lift weights even after arriving in Panama 9 months later, I still couldn't do this. I could do other stuff, but I couldn't do the chest. So now I can. Now I can do all that stuff, but it's just slow. That's a slow I mean, that's why I tell, robotic is it's amazing technology. They make these little keyholes instead of slicing you open, they make little keyholes and go in that way with these micro tools, and it's just much less invasive. So I'm like,
Mhm.
that's what I wanted to do in the first place. I never got a chance, but I think it was literally like about a couple of months after I got my surgery that the first guy on our site popped in, "Hey, by the way, that I had surgery at University of Chicago with Dr. Balke, and I had robotic surgery." Okay. So I was like a little smidgen
Mhm.
too late, but, yeah, so and now there's this great guy in Georgia. Well, now he's in Georgia, he used to be in Philadelphia, right? Dr. Sloan Guy, who was a
Mhm.
former military guy, played college football, just looks like an all-around great dude, and he's in, Georgia, just moved to Georgia Heart Institute, and he does robotic surgery. So, that to me sounds like a pretty darn good option. I wish that was there when I was there. So yeah. So
Right. And now we have a doctor
so
in the
it's been
Southeast who does, people don't have to fly all the way across the country.
totally. Yeah, you don't have to fly,
Mhm.
spend all the money to stay in Palo Alto and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's so I guess
Mhm.
when I got on the website in May or late April 2018, right after being
And
diagnosed,
this
coming
is the
home.
Facebook myocardial bridge support group that you're speaking of.
Yeah, and people sometimes they
Mhm.
think that I created the site. I did not create the site. There's another guy who created the site, and it's awesome that he did years before I even got on it. And when I got on the site, I was the guy like people now. I was the guy asking all the questions. I was the guy who knew nothing. And people like Perry Legree, and then this
Mhm.
a woman named Tracy Crozier, I'm not pronouncing her name right, were really helpful to me when I got on because they had both just did it themselves at Stanford. They both had surgery at Stanford, and they were so awesome in terms of helping me understand. In fact, when I first got on the Facebook site, Perry was literally I don't know if you're familiar with Perry. Perry answers a lot of questions sometimes. He had just posting pictures of himself getting out of surgery and with Dr. Snicker right here, like him and Dr. Snicker together with the heart pillow and everything. And his story is like he had a massive myocardial bridge and he went in difficult symptoms and all that. He had a bypass. He had the wrong operation. He had a bypass done 5 years prior and didn't work because that's the problem with bypass. It can fail, and it failed.
Mhm.
And I guess it would have been his late, now he's in his 40s, his late 30s at the time. So he had to have a second open heart surgery. That's a bad thing to have happen. So, and he's not the only person on our site who's had to have that. Some other people went to Cleveland, they had the same thing. So all the more reason to make sure you do the right surgery. Don't let a doctor convince you to have bypass just because they feel like doing a bypass because 'cause they're more familiar with bypass. That's what happens a lot. Like, these docs do, like, 1,000 bypasses a day or something. They're so used to doing
Mhm.
bypass because it's such a typical operation that they just want to kind of go back to their default op and just do the thing they know. But that's not the primary first line treatment for myocardial bridges because you still end up having a bridge. You still have the same thing you had
Right.
before. Now you just have a bridge with a bypass. So you could do a bypass as a helper, like unroofing surgery is the main surgery to do, and then do a bypass as well to give extra support. But a bypass alone can fail and has failed people. So yeah, you don't want to, because actually the guy I mentioned in New York, when I first went to him, he tried to, before he even saw me in the office on the phone, he's like, I do a bypass, no problem, I do that. And doctors will often tell you too, they're like, I do this all the time. And no, they don't actually do this all the
Yeah.
time.
And like, what is their version
Um,
of all the time?
yeah, right. And the other big thing is this is a big misconception. I should probably make a video about this one too. But so doctors would often tell people, well, I've done hundreds of these, and it's not necessarily totally true. What they mean is that they've done incidental unroofings while they were doing something else. So there was a patient had like plaque or something, whatever else it was, another heart issue. They went in there, and in the course of the operation, when they opened the person up, they said, "Oh, look, there's a myocardial bridge," and then they unroof it on the spot, and that's just an incidental finding within the larger operation. And what makes that different is that the big issue for most people is not doing the surgery, right? It's getting a green light. It's the testing. It's getting people to say this person needs surgery to convince that surgeon to do. Because the surgeon a lot of times is like, I don't know, I'm going to rely on what the other guy said, and they rely on somebody else to tell them the surgery is necessary.
Yeah.
Which Stanford has like a team to do that. And some places, I won't name any names, but some places we do a lot of surgeries now, they have a team and the team's not working real well. So they don't, there's like confusion in the team. They don't know whether to tell a person yes or no. So, yeah, that surgeon may have done incidental unroofings, but you got to that's like the guy in New York. He probably could have done the unroofing, but they were too inept with the testing to get me to the green light stage, even though Stanford had already
Right.
diagnosed it. So that's the big thing is getting the green light. But yeah, so I went to the next year, I guess, recovering, and people, I guess people ask like, okay, how much better are you?
Hmm.
Stanford says they did like a 6 months post-op. They asked people the Seattle Angina Questionnaire, SAQ, which they said 80% of patients feel 80% better. That's their general response that they
Hmm.
got. In my case, I would say I felt, 50% better almost, within the next month or so. Aside from the pain, obviously, I was having from the surgery itself. But in terms of the heart stuff, I would say, I could just my heart was getting more oxygen now. So it's like 50% better. And then real slowly over the next couple of years, I'd say that a lot of the endothelial dysfunction started to heal itself slowly. And now I feel like 75% better or something like that, 80 or something like that. So it's much more than it was, much better than it was before. We should probably talk about that the endothelial dysfunction, the myth of, so this is one of the big myths that unroofing surgery doesn't work if you still have symptoms like right after your operation, like within the next 6 months or a year or something like that. There's like many holes in that. That doesn't make sense because uh, if you do an unroofing operation and they actually do it correctly, then you have no more myocardial bridge. So that part, something's better than it was before. You had a problem, something was crossing your artery. Now you don't have that problem. So that worked. That's it. But the reason people sometimes say that they still have symptoms, which I had too, is because not because there's a myocardial bridge, but because like we talked about earlier, that garden hose has been getting pounded every heartbeat for the last whatever amount of years, and it damages the lining of the garden hose to where, and especially if you're older, this is a bigger deal. It's got to heal, right? If you're younger, it can heal quicker. You have less. It's called endothelial dysfunction because as the endothelium is the lining of the artery, and then it stops working correctly. It stops putting out the nitric oxide and stops responding to the nitric oxide, which tells it to open up when you need it to open up and get more blood through. It just kind of, instead of opening up, it just collapses like a flat tire. And then that collapse causes spasms. So like it's supposed to open up when if you get stress or something, like excitement, playing a basketball game, artery is supposed to go like
Hmm.
this, right? Get more flow. But instead it goes this. That's bad.
Right.
So then you get less flow, and then the artery itself spasms because it's not getting oxygen in itself. It goes like this, and then you can have like a mini heart attack, so to speak, or an actual heart attack,
It's
depending
incredibly
on,
uncomfortable. Yeah.
can only imagine. Yeah, yeah. So that's a myth that somehow because you still have that, that means the surgery didn't work, because that's not what the surgery is supposed to fix. It's supposed to fix the myocardial bridge. The other stuff, the endothelial dysfunction, is a question of your artery literally has to remake itself, or the inside of the hose has to regrow. That takes like years to do that if you're older. But it does get better usually. But it just takes
Mhm.
years. I mean, it's not going to probably ever get back to perfect or brand new, but I'll take 75% over zero anytime. So
Same. Yeah.
so yeah, yeah, for sure. Have you noticed that improvement too? That kind of
I
post-op
have.
improvement?
But the interesting thing is, so Stanford diagnosed me with moderate endothelial
Mhm.
dysfunction in
Okay.
the heart cath. And then right after surgery, when it was time for me to move from the ICU to the PCU, I had the choice of either walking or they were going to put me in a wheelchair. And I chose to walk
This is after yeah, okay.
after my heart surgery. And
Mhm.
I can still remember I immediately said to my husband, Jason, and the surgeon, I can tell you've saved my life. It was that dramatic of a difference.
Wow. Cool.
And yeah. And I'm so glad my husband is quite the photographer and captures all our moments really well. And I felt like I walked really fast from ICU
Mhm.
to PCU. And I did not walk very fast, but in my
Oh,
mind,
really?
I was very fast because I felt that much better.
Yeah.
And I proceeded to have a pretty remarkable recovery until I really got the green light. And then I kept overdoing it. And
Yeah.
I developed vasospasms. And I think we are thinking on developing microvascular disease. And so, my recovery has been profoundly bumpy. And I also have continued to have like peripheral life stress. My mom, I don't know if you remember, but my mom died 9 weeks post open heart surgery. And that really did not help my recovery. The
Wow.
stress of that was really intense. And then,
Mm.
I kind of, well, my body rejected the sternal wires. So I had to have my sternal wires
Oh, I remember
removed.
that. I remember that. Yeah, yeah.
So I just kept getting kind of pummeled. And this is something I've talked about in other episodes that will be on this podcast. I just interviewed my cardiac PT and we had the most amazing conversation about learning to listen to your heart. And I really have been in a master class of learning to listen to my heart and not overdo it. And I
Mm.
had to really let go of going back to my old life. Like I thought I could go back to being a ski instructor and mountain biking the way at the level that I used to, which I mean was not like a competitive level, but I really enjoyed being out a lot. And
Mhm.
my heart just has not given me the green light, but I kept pushing it. So it was
Mhm.
making my symptoms worse. And my blood work around this time last year, I was put in the hospital last Christmas. 2021, I was put in the hospital on Christmas night for elevated blood markers for heart failure. And I was
Really?
really starting to show heart failure. And I had
Mhm.
tried to go back to teaching skiing. My feet were swollen. I was out of breath. I was gaining a lot of fluid around my neck. And yeah, my heart just wasn't ready for any of that. And so
Did you have I forget, did
it's
you have plaque and stuff like that also before the bridge
no, I
or
didn't.
some you didn't?
I
Okay.
didn't. It was just, I think maybe my heart is partially extra special. I just tried to go back too soon is what my best guess is. And yeah, I went to the Mayo Clinic this past summer and then did a whole new workup
Mm.
of everything and really took like a fresh look at my heart and the whole thing. And they were like, we would not have unroofed you. And I was like, well, I think you're wrong there because I felt immeasurably better after the surgery.
How about that? How about that statement? I mean, we would not have unroofed you. I mean, really? It's like, really? I mean, this is the
Mhm.
one in Rochester, right?
Yeah. And I
Yeah, and
love them, but I told them they
I don't
were
wanna talk
wrong.
smack about yeah, I mean, they have a record of, like, this is you're not the first. They have multiple people that they've turned away, like, ti they're I don't wanna talk smack about hospitals on the show, but, like, I don't know what's going on
Mhm.
up there because they keep turning people away. Like, they just told a person who obviously benefited from surgery, we wouldn't do surgery on you because you had a really deep myocardial bridge.
Mhm,
That's the
mhm.
ultimate person you should do surgery on. What was their reasoning for that? I'm just curious, like, why would they say that?
I don't remember now. I think I shut them down before they could even go there because that is just
Yeah.
something I know to my core that saved my life. I think there was maybe some, hypothesis about screwing up the electrical, circuitry of the heart, which probably has some bearing. And at the time, my heart rate I was having palpitations and vasospasms, and there was some concern I was going into an arrhythmia, but an arrhythmia had not been found yet, but my heart was fluttering and it was really uncomfortable. But now I've been on a slow acting nitroglycerin and I'm doing so much better. I mean, I'm not the fastest person in the mountains, but I don't care about that. I just want to be able to climb mountains again and ski and do all the things that I did with my friends and my husband.
Mm,
And I'm able to
mm,
do that now just at a much slower pace.
mm.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think my point of view is it's just so much bigger than the unroofing, and there's so much opportunity to really zoom out to 50,000 feet and look at your life from 50,000 feet. And it's such a lesson in like, we've been given this second chance. I consider
Mhm.
this my bonus
Yeah.
life. I'm on bonus
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I'm no longer really wringing my wrists anymore over my heart. If I have a rough day, I have a rough day.
Mhm,
If my heart skips a beat, it skips a beat. And I know when I need to go to the ER now and when I don't. And
mhm,
I still have days where I have some ER level pain, but I know I
mhm,
don't have a blockage because I've had 3 heart caths now. And I just know that my heart is telling me to knock it off. I've given my
mm.
heart an avatar and, it's its own little personality,
Fucking
and
hell, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I just know when it's telling me to knock it off.
Yeah.
So that's how I described how I'm doing.
Well, I didn't know that you had that Mayo visit and all that stuff. Yeah.
Mhm,
One little side note on what you were saying about the test, that you had no plaque and everything. I've discovered, I mean, there's other stuff that can, stiffen your arteries and things like that, that doesn't come up on a lot of these tests. For example, there's this big one, it's called, lipoprotein A. There's
mhm.
some famous trainer guy, I think he was Oprah's trainer, whoever that guy is, who had to literally stop doing a lot of things because he had this massive amount of lipoprotein A in his arteries. It's a huge thing. It's one of the main markers of heart disease, but it's not calcium score, it's not the usual cholesterol plaque, it's just a separate thing, lipoprotein A.
How do you measure that, and how do you know?
There's some kind of newer test that does, but usually it's not commonly done for everybody, but you can do it. You can test for it. It's like LP parentheses A, lipoprotein A. There's something else called, well, there's fibrin. There's just fibrin. It's just stuff. It's like the same type of stuff that makes like blood clots and scabs and things like that. On the inside of your arteries when they get abrasion, your body puts that stuff on there, and normally it takes it out too with these enzymes that eat it up, like protein eating enzymes. But as you get older, it just kind of accumulates. So there's this stuff called serapeptase. You ever heard of this enzyme? Which could be used for anything. It's a protein eating enzyme, and you just take it without any food. Goes off into your system. It becomes a systemic enzyme through your bloodstream, and it eats that stuff right up. So I've been taking that for years, actually. I think I've had a really big problem with that before. I think my arteries are messed up, but I took so much of that stuff, I think it ate a lot of that stuff right up. So serapeptase, it's a big time, you know, high potency enzyme that eats up fiber. But that's not just for myocardial bridge patients, that's for anybody in general. But
Mhm.
so yeah, but so there's other things, besides just the usual cholesterol and calcium plaque that can stiffen arteries and things like that. I also do right now. I'm doing this. I just literally just started this 2 weeks ago. I forget if I messaged you about it, the EECP
Mhm.
treatment.
Yeah, I was hoping
Yeah,
you would share with our audience what you're up to continue to help you heal.
it's wild. Yeah, so I'm doing here in Panama. It's not that complicated. You just get up on a table and basically you have to kind of see it. If you look online, it's EECP, electro something something counter pulsation, and all it is basically like it's actually invented in China. It's a very holistic kind of like solution. It's not invasive. They don't have to go into your body or anything. and you spend an hour each session, 35 sessions, 35 hours. Basically, you get up on a table and those inflatable kind of cuffs that you get for your blood pressure, like plates. It's kind of like that, except they put those on your legs, like your calves and your thighs, not your feet. And they hook up, the nodes to your chest, so it knows when your heart's beating. And basically, you just lie there, and then every time your heart beats, it sends a signal to make these cups have like a high pressure inflations, like this, and they basically squash your legs, and that sends squeeze like a sponge. It squeezes the blood out of your legs, makes it go up towards your chest. Not like a huge gush. It just moves back like a little bit each time. So your heart's making the blood to go one way in your through your bloodstream, and then it goes back the other way a little bit. And the general idea is that that causes that blood to like the total amount of volume in your upper body to increase. So all these arteries up here, which don't normally, he was explaining it like they don't normally get expanded because they keep emptying out into the heart, but now they do. So it stimulates their growth. Yeah, so it stimulates like nitric oxide production, stimulates the endothelium to grow, and it also this is crazy part. If these are the arteries as they started, it stimulates the growth of like new branches, like new extension arteries off of those, which have to be healthy because they're not, they haven't been around before. They're brand new. So, it's pretty wild, but, yeah, so I've done it for 9 times so far,
And
and
why
so
are you
far
doing this?
I'm doing yeah, because I was diagnosed with severe endothelial dysfunction, by Stanford before the op, and which means I had lots of spasms, and I still have spasms now, but they're nothing like they were before, and because I also was diagnosed with microvascular disease as well, MVD,
Mhm.
which means the smaller vessels, so I forget if that was severe or moderate, but it was definitely there. But like I said, so that's why I'm taking it. And I still have issues with, just general part of it too is this is sometimes gets forgotten, I think, this point is that so I wish I had my pictures, that old Chinese film here, but so basically if your artery, the one that people focus on most with myocardial bridges is your LAD, right? Your left anterior descending artery. And so that's the one that feeds the left ventricle of your heart, which is where the blood comes out from through your whole body. So that's a real important artery. So mine, like if you look at the scan, it was stuck inside of the latter half of it basically was stuck inside of a muscle, heart muscle for my whole life. So if you look at it, it comes down like a nice tube, like a regular tube. And the bottom half down here is before surgery. It looks like somebody's stepping on it. Like literally, it's like it goes from about that thick to about that
Yeah.
thick. And the doctor in Philadelphia, the guy who wouldn't do it, who said he wouldn't nobody would touch this, he comes back from the video and he's like kind of a no nonsense, guy. He's like, "You have the artery of a small old woman." I'm like, "Thank you, appreciate it."
Oh,
But that
reassuring.
yeah, he's like I was like, "An old woman?" It's like, "No, small old woman." "Oh, small old." But, like, the first part's great, the top of it, then the second half is really, really skinny. So, I don't know if it's any bigger now that it's not in the heart muscle anymore, I hope so, but it's just small, so you need more auxiliary, apparently they call them
Mm.
what's the word? Not corollary, but like helper arteries. You can grow new other arteries to branch out to like
Secondary
assist
arteries.
with that. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And so
Okay.
that's part of what I'm doing it. And I've already seen some benefits. It's only been, they say the first 10, you notice I've done 9. So I've seen some, but the cool thing is that you do it 35 times, but it really stimulates the body to do this, to make these new arteries that keeps going for like, I think months after you finish the last one. So it's like a process that your body gets, sort of pushed into, so yeah,
Okay.
so I'm hoping that that's gonna keep improving, so far so good.
So how many total treatments do they recommend for the EECP?
The typical number is 35, and I've only done 9, so for 9 each one's an hour, so
Mhm.
I pay here in Panama, it's like the guy I'm doing it with is the guy who brought it to Panama like a decade ago, the first one to do it, so it's like $100 a session times 35, $3,500, which is a lot, but it's at the same
Okay.
time, it's like nothing compared to a heart operation. So,
Oh, yeah. And it's
yeah,
your health.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Wow.
deal, yeah. Mhm.
Before we hang up, I want to make sure we cover a little bit more about the Facebook group. So
Yeah,
I continue to think about social media and its role in saving my life. And I think about the day that it was in early August where I thought, I wonder if there's a support group for myocardial bridging. And the only reason why I knew about it was because my surgeon, or sorry, not my surgeon, my first cardiologist I saw told me he was going to go looking for it because he was suspecting that's what it was.
Hmm.
And then he found
Good for
it.
him. Good for him. Wow, jeez.
Well, and then I read my own report and found it. And then he still told me that I just had anxiety
Oh,
and
bad
he
for him.
blew me off.
Okay. At
And
least he got one thing right.
right, exactly. So I typed in myocardial bridge into Facebook just to see if there was anything out there because I
Mhm.
was so new to it. And thank goodness this group existed. And I just want to debunk the myth that all of social media is toxic and bad because I can think of so many people who I've spoken with on our group site, the myocardial bridge support group site, that have said it. This Facebook group saved their life here in
Yeah.
2023, right?
Mm, mm,
Like, it's mind blowing to me that Facebook was what helped me advocate for the help that I eventually got that saved my life.
mhm. Yeah,
And so
totally.
you are
It helped me
now
too. Well, yeah,
right, but and now you give
yeah.
back and you're the administrator and I make up that you just get busier and busier with it because I just see the amount of members we have now versus when I joined in 2021. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about your role and what you see and what you are witness to. Because I don't go to it that
Mm,
much right now because I'm frankly kind of tired of my story and I just trying to go
yeah,
forward. But when I have the bandwidth, I do log in and try to add my 2 cents if I think it's needed.
mhm.
But tell me about what you do now to maintain that site.
Yeah, it's been a unexpected thing, I guess. It's, like, okay, so here's me, the guy on the steps of the Chinese hospital alone on a sea of marble with I have no idea what the heck's going on. And that was like 4 years ago. And now I'm the guy that people ask questions to on the Facebook site. Like there's 1,700 people on our site. And I've probably talked to 600 of them personally on chats, like people in Pakistan, people in India, people in Ireland, people in, I mean, whatever, so it's like, okay, that happened. Like, I don't know anything from right? So, how did that journey take so, yeah, basically, part of it is that I got on the site having no idea what I was doing and, was, like, asking Perry the Great, was asking Tracy Crozier, anybody by the way, we should give a massive shout out to Donna Miranda, who was the nurse at Stanford, because
Oh, she's amazing.
she's like, 10-time All-Star. Yeah, she's just like she also teaches nursing, by the way. She's a nurse at Stanford, but she teaches nursing. She, I believe, is the one who mentioned towards the very beginning, she's like, there's a site out there on Facebook, that our patients tell us about. You should probably check it out. If she hadn't said that, it would have been months before I would just would have been a slower process. And because I got on it early, the ball started, the ball started rolling. But yeah, kind of what happened, I guess, was that I was on it. This is like 4.5 years ago. There were probably like 200 people when I got on, and it was like now there's 1,700. So I think basically at the beginning, I was asking tons of questions, and then I would go. You know, I went to so many doctors. I drove to Philadelphia twice. I drove to New York 3 times. I got stupid information. I knew it. I came back and asked people, "Is this right?" I know it's not right, right? They're like, "No, it's not right. That doesn't make sense." I went to Stanford 4 times. When I was at Stanford, I'm also a journalist too, so I came in with a kind of an educator, teacher, journalist mindset, asking, probably pestering her with questions. She's probably like, "Get this guy out of here. He's asking me too many questions." So I asked all these people questions and asked questions on Facebook and looked stuff up. And it got to be a point where I started answering other people's questions, just naturally they had the same questions I did. And then that just built to where I think it was during COVID, somewhere in COVID. Or no, actually, no, I take that back. The year before that, like 2019, the year after the operation. Part of it was just like there's so many questions. I should just write a frequently asked questions document to save people the time of answering the same questions again and again. You know what I mean? Like just out of convenience. So I started with like a couple of pages. Now it's 50 pages long. So it makes life a lot easier. You just say, "Read that," you know?
Do you have a table of contents? I haven't looked.
There's a table of contents. Yeah, yeah. We should probably get somebody to make it clickable or something, but yeah. And it's got, like, all kinds of myths and studies and, where to go, and it's got a surgeon that's another thing, like, at the beginning was just Stanford. That's where to go. And I had my operation at Stanford. And now No one else knew where to go for surgery. Now there's 20 something doctors who have done this surgery on the site all over the world, all over the US, all over. That's a big, improvement.
But 20 is not very many.
It should be 300, right? Like, but yeah, exactly. And
Mhm.
and there's probably another 300 out there we just don't know about that have done some unroofing at some point, but
Okay.
nobody bothers to.
Yeah.
So that just kept spiraling. The FAQ went from 15 to 20 to 50, then it's 50 pages. But one massive thing, I don't know, a lot of people realize this because it kind of came and went, was during COVID, which is the following year, 2020. I was teaching here in Panama. You're sitting around your house doing COVID, right? Like February, March or April of 2020. And yet another person got on the site, I think, and said, my doctor denied me surgery. He says it doesn't, the myocardial bridges don't cause symptoms. And I'm like, oh my, this is ridiculous. Like, what is going on out there? And then somebody posted a video. Somebody posted somebody posted a video of a guy. I'm not trying to, put anybody on blast here, but it was a guy from England, a doctor in England, who kind of one of these guys that, is your friendly cardiologist type of a guy, just trying to make him some videos of different conditions, his expertise. And he made a video about myocardial bridges. And I'm watching this thing, I'm like on the most important points, like the fact that why bridges cause symptoms, he was dead wrong. Like, he had been not only wrong, but he was completely backwards. And I had been talking about this myth for the last, like, year on the site. I was saying, "It's a myth, it's a myth, it's a myth." And I said, "Oh my god, I wonder where he's getting this from. Where could he, like, why is a doctor making this? Like, he's going out of his way to make a video about a myth. Like, why?" So I said, "I wonder where it could be." So I Googled, like, where could it be coming from? And I first did the Wikipedia page, and I read the Wikipedia page. I said, "This is all wrong. Who made this?" So somebody had put, like, the main falsehoods about myocardial bridges right on the Wikipedia page, and doctors around the world, like you just said, the power of social media, right? Well, guess what? A lot of
Mhm,
doctors
mhm.
get information from Doctor Google and Doctor Wikipedia, and they were basically looking at Wikipedia and then denying patients surgery based on what Wikipedia said. That right? And I it just
That's
this
frightening.
gigantic light bulb went off in my head. It's Friday, right? So right there in the next couple of weeks, I just like, I gotta write I was COVID, so you're just hanging around. So I just rewrote the whole thing. I just erased the entire Wikipedia page, started from scratch, and I rewrote the entire thing, and then I sent it to Stanford because I know Dr. Snicker and Donna, and
Mhm.
I said, "Look, I rewrote this whole thing, but I wanna make sure it's right. Can you take a look? All the studies, all the little scientific points that I said and all this, can you just double check?" It took about a week, got back to me.
Mhm.
She made 3 or 4 edits or something, and now it's changed. So, like, now, I think that a big it's kind of a subtle thing in the background, but I think that kinda took the bad info off the table, like, the doctors were looking at,
Yeah.
so at least in some parts. That was a I think that was big because now we can refer patients, like, we can say, "Look at the FAQ," or "Look at that," and we don't have to be like, "But don't ignore that part," just don't look at that part, just, we can say, "Yeah, look at that," and it makes sense, so, yeah,
Well,
so
I just thank you for your service. I mean, it's such an act of service
mhm,
to do what you have done. And, thank you for helping me. Thank you for helping all the others. You are contributing so much. And the biggest piece of advice I've been giving out lately is like I just celebrated 2 years of my unroofing,
mm,
and I got together with a few friends yesterday, and I was telling them, I said, the reason why I had you all specifically with me to celebrate is because I remember how each of you validated my experience.
mm,
You just sat there with me in the muck and listened and cared for me and checked on me, and you listened. You didn't try to make it better. You just said, I'm here. And I remember you did that for me. And that's what the support group does on Facebook. It's like, here's this container
mm,
that you can find all the information you need. You can reach out to other people. You can hear other people's like real time stories, and it's so validating to know that you aren't alone. And these specific friends I was with yesterday, I never felt alone because of them.
mm.
And I think that is so important in healing as when you know you're not alone. that you can go through something really shitty and hard
Mm,
and not have to do it alone.
mm.
That's this Facebook group. And I'm not on Twitter, but I know that you have a Twitter for myocardial bridge, correct?
Yeah, we have just, MB Research Info is the handle, MB Research Info. It's just we just
Okay.
post studies and updates from our site and just stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, just like information.
Great.
But yeah, but I know it's
Great. Thank
yeah,
you.
that's another way of just because I post studies on the Facebook page, then I'm like, "Well, why does only this group get to see it? We'll just put that for the whole world," you know? So, but no, I mean, it's
Hmm.
like I said, I know exactly what you mean, the validation. It was me, like, you know what I mean? That was me on the site 4 years before that. So I was on the other end of it, you know?
Hmm.
So how could I forget that? You know, social media is a powerful thing, you know? So it's like, there's not that many people that get a chance to, like, help somebody in Pakistan, you know, like with a life changing, you know what I mean? Who's in that same situation that you were in before, and they're coming to you on the
Hmm.
site. It's like something about it. Just you just know you're making a difference in helping people. It's a good. Yeah, I know. You know, you're a teacher too, right? So
Yeah.
you know what that's like. But so that's it's a cool thing for me to be able to
Well,
help.
and that's the point of this podcast. It's another way, and it's not just for myocardial bridge, it's for anyone who needs any kind of open heart surgery. But you don't have to do this alone. And I hope that those that listen to our episode today, that are going through the myocardial bridge journey, take it from two people who fought tooth and nail to make it through the medical system, but we did it. And look at us now. You're thriving in Panama.
Mhm,
I'm feeling good enough I'm writing a book and doing this podcast. Like there is life after a really tough journey, and it actually can be really beautiful
mm,
and maybe even better than before.
mm. And you bring up a good point that you talk about your new life or your second life or your extra life. You know, and that's how I feel too.
Mhm.
It's like
Bonus life.
yeah, and it's also the like, it never ceases to amaze me, like, that I went through 40 whatever amount of years, 44, 45 years. My birthday's April 30th, so I was diagnosed, like, before that, but, without knowing this. Do you know what I mean? Like, this almost like something that now, because now I spend so much time on the Facebook side, it's like that surgery was such a big deal in my life, and I just walked through that 40 whatever years of this serious heart issue without knowing it. So I connected
Mhm.
to your point, like, if you're somebody out there, like, it just kind of a lesson, right, for life. Like, there's people out there with myocardial bridges and all kinds of other stuff out there who they're just having a hard damn time. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, cut them a break, you know? And I probably not the best,
Yeah.
it wasn't the best at that growing up. I wasn't the best at cutting people a break, you know?
Mhm.
But it give me a
Oh, I wasn't either.
yeah. So, can I tell you a funny story? It's just one of those things. So, I came out of surgery, and I was staying at the Hampton Inn, I think, in, Mountain View, whatever it was, near Palo Alto. And I just thought of because it illustrates the point I wanted to make. And I looked like garbage because I hadn't had a shower. You can't shower the day before surgery. You can't shower for days after surgery. So I
Mhm.
look like garbage. My hair is like the
Oh,
mad
yeah.
professor in Back to the
Oh,
Future.
we're
Yeah.
beauty
Yeah.
pageant level when you're going
Yeah.
through open heart surgery. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I'm all, like, bundled up, and it's, like, wintertime, it's December, and I'm walking around, like, kind of, like, waddling around the parking lot. And my chest is I'm on 6 different painkillers, you know, so I probably look like a garbage, and I walk into a Chinese restaurant in Mountain View, and Mountain View is, like, one of these, like, tech, you know, Silicon Valley type of places with a lot of money and everything. I walk into this Chinese restaurant, and the guy thinking I just wanna get to I wanna, like, make it to the counter to be able to ask to see the menu, like, because I'm, like, walking real slow, you know? And the guy a guy comes over to me, points at me like, "Get out like, you, get out of here." And I'm like I was confused because I'm also on painkillers. I'm like, "Am I hallucinating here? Was this guy actually talking to me?"
Mhm.
And he did it I was like I kept walking, and I thought maybe he'd get the wrong person, somebody behind me or something. He's like, "You out." I'm just like, "What?" You know? And he threw me out of the restaurant, and I couldn't it took me a while to figure out what the hell was even
Wow.
going on, right? Yeah. I realized he thought I was a homeless person, like, stumbling off the street because I probably looked like a homeless person, you know? And I was like, "Oh, damn, okay." But my point is that that was one time for me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And it's a
Mhm.
point, but it's every day for some people. Do you know what I mean? Because like, it's a
Yeah.
point that struck me, like, a while ago that, like, a lot of times the people who need help the most are the people who are grumpy. They feel like garbage, you know, they're irritable, they have anxiety. They do freak out when nothing's happening. They're not feeling right. They don't look right. Maybe they screw up. Like they look like there's something
Yeah.
wrong, and so they're often the people we
Hmm.
don't want to help. Like the people that need help the most, the people who don't get who we pass over. We want to help somebody who's successful. Do you know what I'm saying? So it just struck me because then that was me getting it on the other end of it. So it was like, okay, so, but there's all kind of people out there who just get skipped over, passed over, nah, you don't have a problem. Notice this and notice that. And yeah, so it just kind of opens your eyes, makes you a little bit more mature, to go through stuff like that. And this is kind of a hard surgery and everything, and makes you appreciate
Oh,
other
yeah.
people who go through stuff like that as well.
And I say that I have a much more open-hearted life.
Mm,
I find that I'm so much quicker to love and quicker to forgive and quicker to meet people where they're at.
mhm.
Whereas before, my heart was literally caged.
Yeah, I could see it because I think some of us also we should say that you know myocardial bridges. Stanford believes that they're hereditary, that they're passed on in family, run in families. That's their words. It's hard. It's impossible almost to prove that because you'd have to have like generations of dead people and get their hearts and see, right? But they've had
Mhm.
multiple. There's been multiple parents and kids who both had myocardial bridges at the same surgery at Stanford, for example. And I've seriously almost convinced that certain people in my family, had it or have it, and maybe in your family as well. We will never know, maybe in a lot of cases, but so yeah, so like it's like a lot of people we might have grown up with. Some of the people on the site may have members of their parents or their uncles and aunts or brothers and sisters might also have a myocardial bridge. It might also have anxiety, may also be irritable or feel tired and nobody knew why. And so, yeah, so, oh, you're just lazy or you're just anxious or you're just a hypochondriac and this and that, so
Yeah.
all these things, but it just kind of scrapes in a little deeper. And like you're saying, uncages your heart. I like that metaphor.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, I've really appreciated your time today.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's just a great idea to have this podcast. And honestly, it's like of all the people on the site, you had a really bad case with myocardial bridge. You had a heart attack on a ski slope, was it? Or a mountain bike?
Mountain biking.
Jesus.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
it's like one of the things I noticed from your case, like when you got on, I remember when you got on the site, is that you kept persevering through it and you kept asking questions and pressing forward and stuff. And it's such a lighthouse, it's such like a light that people can follow. You know what I mean? They just keep pressing forward because you got the surgery, even though despite the damn COVID and the fact you couldn't get that hospital, the doctors told you no. And it's like, you know, that's an amazing achievement to have to and then come out the other side like this and be making a podcast. It's like it helps inspire me, honestly. So I really appreciate you doing that and,
Mm.
and
Well,
having
thank
this
you.
podcast.
It didn't occur to me to give up.
Yeah.
Didn't cross my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't give in very easily, almost to a fault, like I said.
Yeah.
But
That's good.
oh, well, thank you so much. And that's the show for today. Thank you for spending part of your day with me. The Heart Chamber exists because of you. If you find value in this podcast, consider donating to this cause. Go to theheartchamberpodcast.com and go to the donate link. And hey, while you're there, feel free to leave me a voicemail. I want to hear from you. Lastly, don't forget to leave a review and make sure you subscribe so you never miss another Tuesday edition of The Heart Chamber. Thanks again. Have a great week, and I'll be back next week with more stories of open heart surgery and recovery.